Hello and welcome to Arcana Index. Here, each week we are taking a deep dive into one piece of Unearthed Arcana, usually a subclass, that has been released for Dungeons & Dragons 5.24. We talk about the viability and playability of each part of the release, and what changes you might want to consider before using them in your games, even before the fully published releases. Over the last few weeks, we have been working on covering the latest piece of Unearthed Arcana, the Psion update that was released on October 2nd, 2025. We recently covered the core class features and the newly released and updated for 2024 spells. Today, we're going to start going into the subclasses. In this document, there are three subclasses: the Metamorph, the Psykinetic, and the Telepath. The Psywarper isn't in this playtest document, but they did say the Psywarper subclass scored exceptionally well and doesn't need to go through another playtest. Since we are getting well into spooky season, we are going to start by doing a deep dive into the spookiest of these subclasses. At least to my mind, that has to fall to the Metamorph. The document tells us your mastery of psionic powers turns inward. Your own flesh becomes like clay to you, and you mold it into the perfect vessel for your psionic powers. Experience in manipulating your life energy also enables you to adjust the life force of friends and foes. This subclass fills a couple roles. They get access to some healing, but they also use their psionic powers to form weapons out of their body and can be melee or range damage dealers. So they can be healers or spell swords, but in the grossest way possible. Maybe at some point I will do a video talking about the lore and D&D history of the Gish playstyle, since as my players and friends will tell you, it is absolutely my favorite kind of character to play. So I'm really excited by this concept. The Metamorph gets a few features right at first level. First up, they get Metamorph Spells, so let's check out what they get at each level. Starting at level 3, they get Alter Self, Cure Wounds, Inflict Wounds, and Lesser Restoration. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Alter Self is very thematic, and it might have some underwater uses or possibly some disguise or infiltration uses, but honestly there are better ways to get both of those effects, and the combat uses of Alter Self is even worse on this character than on most other characters. At level 5 we get Aura of Vitality and Haste. Both are decent spells, but as many of you know, Aura of Vitality is written to sound like it's primarily a combat spell, but it's honestly better as a means of restoring a lot of hit points outside of combat. Haste isn't a bad spell on a Gish, but if I was going to use Haste, I'd want to make sure I did something with my feet at level 4 to secure my concentration. At level 7, we get Polymorph and Stone Skin. Polymorph is great, very thematic. Stone Skin is better than it was in 2014, but spending my action and my concentration in combat on a purely defensive self-buff is not my favorite way to use spells. At level 9, we get Contagion and Mass Cure Wounds. Contagion is a better spell in the 2024 rule set, but it still targets a Constitution saving throw and inflicts the poison condition, which is not great. But it does a decent amount of damage and is a solid spell overall. Overall, it's a pretty solid spell list. Honestly, most Gishes I like to play rely pretty heavily on their weapons in combat, and it will be nice to have some out-of-combat healing options for my spell slots. That's just my preferred playstyle though. I know probably the most technically optimal way to play a full caster spellsword is as a caster first and a combatant second, but I don't do character builds. I'm not really concerned about optimal play. For this channel, I'm far more worried about fun at my table. Both not wanting things to be so strong it trivializes the game, and not wanting things to be too weak that it makes my players frustrated that they can't do the things that they imagine for their character. With that spell list, I think it does fall right in the sweet spot. Also at level 3, we get Mutable Form. This says, as a bonus action, you can expend 1 psionic energy die to psionically stretch your limbs for 1 minute. Roll the expended psionic energy die and gain a number of temporary hit points equal to the number rolled plus your intelligence modifier. You gain the following benefits while this feature is active. Reach. Your reach increases by 5 feet. Speed. Your speed increases by 5 feet. And touch. When you cast a spell that has a range of touch and a casting time of an action, you can make the spell's range 10 feet. This is a decent benefit that will get more interesting as we get into the next feature because you also get organic weapons. This gives you the chance to create one of 3 weapons, but the way that they word this ability is very particular. So let's take a look at what they have to say, and then I'll tell you why it's worded in this way. You can shape your limbs into weapons. As a magic action, you can reform your free hand into one of the following organic weapons: Bone Blade, Flesh Maul, or Viscera Launcher. When you take the attack action, you can use this feature before you make the attack roll. Your limb retains the form of the organic weapon until you take a magic action to change it into another organic weapon, you have the unconscious condition, or you return the limb to its previous form, no action required. Whenever you attack with the weapon, you can use your intelligence modifier for the attack and damage rolls instead of using strength or dexterity. Essentially, as part of the attack action, you can create one of these weapons. Then they remain until you are unconscious, you use a magic action to change them, or you dismiss it with no action required. So I don't actually know why you would ever use an action to change it. Since you can dismiss it with no action required, then recreate them as part of your attack action. But in the previous Unearthed Arcana, they reverted after you hit or missed with the attack, much like the Soul Knight Rogue Psionic Blades do. However, it was worded in a way that the organic weapons didn't actually work with the extra attack feature they get at level 6. And now they do. So, what does each of these weapons actually do? Well, the Bone Blade does 1d8 piercing damage on a hit, and you essentially get pack tactics, meaning you have advantage on attack rolls you make if you have an ally within 5 feet of the target. Interestingly, this natural weapon also has the finesse property, meaning there could be some cool synergy here with a rogue multiclass. I don't know, like I said, I don't really do character builds, but maybe someone could see if there was anything there. The Flesh Maul counts as a simple melee weapon and deals 1d10 bludgeoning damage on a hit. A creature hit by the Maul has disadvantage on their next strength or constitution saving throw they make before the start of its next turn. This is interesting because it is a 1d10 weapon that with mutable form essentially has reach, meaning this might be the only d10 weapon with reach that you can in theory wield with one hand. If you take a feat or multiclass for shield proficiency, this could actually be very good. And third, we get the Viscera Launcher. This one might actually be the most horror movie-esque. This says, your hand and forearm transform into a crossbow made of muscle and sinew that fires bolts of bile. The launcher counts as a simple ranged weapon with a normal range of 30 feet and a long range of 90 feet, and it deals 1d6 acid damage on a hit. Once on each of your turns, when you hit a creature with an attack roll using the launcher, you can deal an extra 1d6 acid damage to the target. So at base level, this is a ranged weapon that deals 2d6 damage per attack. This is actually a really good option. Once you reach level 6, you only get 2d6 on one of your attacks, and 1d6 on the other. But as we'll get into shortly, there are some really good ways to mitigate that. Because at level 6, we get extra attack. But like Eldritch Knights, Valor Bards, and Blade Singers, we get the special extra attack that says you can cast one of your Scion cantrips that has a casting time of an action in place of one of those attacks. And unlike any of those classes, we are already making all of our attacks with intelligence. So that means that this is actually the best type of character to use True Strike on, especially if you want to utilize the Viscera Launcher. And now with that, over 2 attacks, you deal an extra d6 on the attack that you were using to cast a cantrip, and an extra d6 when you hit once per turn. You can also change all of that damage to radiant damage, meaning you can deal either radiant or acid damage. And I can't be sure about all third-party content, but I have not found any monsters that are immune to both acid and radiant damage. No monsters that are resistant to both damage types. No monsters that are immune to acid and resistant to radiant. And there are 3 monsters that are immune to radiant and resistant to acid damage. All that is to say that this damage should be incredibly reliable. At this point, we're in a pretty good place. There are some glaring weaknesses in this subclass, we'll talk about those in a little bit. But we aren't even done with level 6 yet. That's because we also get Flesh Weaver. This says, when you use Mutable Form, you can expend an additional psionic energy die to gain the following benefits, while the feature is active. Organic Defense. You gain a +2 bonus to armor class. Empowered Healing. When you cast a spell with a spell slot that restores hit points to one or more creatures, you can expend 1 psionic energy die, roll it, and add the number rolled to the number of the hit points regained. This does do a lot to benefit our admittedly weak defenses, but it's also incredibly expensive. In order to use this, we have to use Mutable Form, which costs a psionic energy die. Then to use this feature, we have to expend a second psionic energy die. At this level, we only have 6, and this is using 2 of them. Not to mention, even with this, we are not in an amazing place with our defense. We're probably using mage armor and have a +2 to dexterity, so we're sitting at a base armor class of 15. Most of the time, if we use this feature, that puts us up to 17. If we cast Shield, that gets us up to 22. We can push that a little bit higher if we cast Haste, but that might be ill-advised depending on how confident we are with our concentration checks. That feels like a lot, but it's also taking a third of our psionic energy dice, our concentration, a 3rd level spell slot, a 1st level spell slot for mage armor, and our reaction and a 1st level spell slot every round for shield. If you compare that to a Valor Bard who's wearing half plate and has a shield, they're sitting at a 19 armor class all the time with no resources spent. Blade Singers and Eldritch Knights can get that even higher with few resources. But if there were no trade-offs or weaknesses, it wouldn't be as interesting. Don't get me wrong, we are still in a very good place, but we do have to acknowledge the weaknesses as we see them. This is also where the reach part of Mutable Form will come into play. Having reach should help you get into and out of combat as more of a skirmisher. Next, at level 10, we get improved Mutable Form. This increases the duration of our Mutable Form to 10 minutes and provides one of 3 benefits. You can choose which benefit you get each time you use Mutable Form. First up, we have Stony Epidermis, which says you have advantage on Constitution saving throws made to maintain concentration. In addition, choose one of the following damage types: acid, bludgeoning, cold, fire, lightning, piercing, poison, slashing, or thunder. You gain resistance to the chosen damage type. On-demand resistance is really good. You won't choose this every time, but I find that often within the first round of combat, I know if I need a resistance and what type of resistance I should use. Usually, I would say the advantage on concentration checks is amazing, but if you're waiting until 10th level to solve your concentration-related issues, that might already be a mistake. Next, we can choose Superior Stride, which says, while you aren't wearing armor, you can take the dash action as a bonus action, and you have a climb speed and a swim speed equal to your speed. Again, this will have situational benefits. I feel like this is the more exploration-focused option. It's good to have when you need it. And the last option is Unnatural Flexibility. This says you gain a +1 bonus to armor class, and your body, along with any equipment you're wearing or carrying, becomes pliable. You can move through spaces as narrow as 1 inch, and you can spend 5 feet of movement to escape from non-magical restraints or end the grapple condition. This is probably the feature I would use as the default option. It's good and will be relevant in almost every condition where you're wanting to use your Mutable Form already. The last feature we get in this subclass at level 14 is Life-Bending Weapons. This says, your weapon becomes wreathed in negative energy and you radiate life-mending psionic energy. When you hit a target with an attack roll using your organic weapons, roll 1 psionic energy die. The target takes extra necrotic damage equal to the number rolled. This roll doesn't expend a die. Alternatively, when you hit a creature with your organic weapon, you can instead expend 1 psionic energy die and roll it. The target takes extra necrotic damage equal to the roll, and each creature of your choice in a 30-foot emanation originating from you regains hit points equal to the number rolled plus your intelligence modifier. Once you use this feature, you can't do so again until the start of your next turn. This is a nice feature. Getting a 1d10, eventually 1d12 bonus to each of your damage rolls is really good, and the healing will be super useful when you need it. Getting to heal multiple people without giving up any of your attacks or bonus action is a very good way to get a downed ally back up and into the fight. This is a solid subclass. I think it would be a really fun addition to any table, as long as the visuals don't make people at your table sick. If there's anybody at your table that has a hard time with body horror, please don't bring this subclass. There are a couple potential weaknesses here. First, this is true for any subclass that gets weapons as a class feature. I'm talking about the Soul Knife Rogue, Path of the Beast Barbarian, but at least as of right now, you won't have a plus to hit chance that you can get from a magic weapon. We don't know exactly what it will look like, but in this document it does say magic items that provide benefits to organic weapons will appear in a future product if this subclass is printed. So hopefully this will solve that first issue. I'm hopeful at the same time they will introduce magic items that will benefit the Soul Knife Rogue as well. My guess is we'll have to wait until they release the updated Beast Barbarian before we see magic items meant for them, but hopefully this will provide a good template that DMs can extrapolate from to make those items as well. The second weakness here we've already discussed, and that comes in the form of defense. This can be mitigated by the things we talked about earlier. The other question I can see here is, does this class blow the Bladesinger out of the water? I don't think it does. The Bladesinger has a much higher defensive threshold and addresses the concentration issues much earlier. If you're using content from both 2024 and 2014, which if you're playing a Bladesinger you are, you get access to spells like Spirit Shroud, and you get access to Conjure Minor Elementals to really push your damage to higher levels. So this has been the deep dive into the Metamorph. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And I'd be thrilled if you consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel to see more deep dives into Unearthed Arcana, classes, subclasses, and spells. Thank you so much for stopping by, and until next time.